As it says on the tin, today we're going to have a look at my Neo-Soviet Copplestone Force for Deadzone 3rd edition, and we're going to have a quick flick through a battle report between two GCPS factions. The GCPS, the Global Co-Prosperity Sphere, harkening back to the kind of, I think, the East Asian co-prosperity sphere that the Japanese were going to impose if they'd won World War II, are kind of like the corporation from Alien, except there are many of them, and they basically run the human part of the galaxy in the Mantic lore for Mantic Games skirmish wargame Deadzone, which is basically the equivalent of Games Workshop's Kill Team, and to be fair, kind of predated it.
So this is my Neo-Soviet force painted up for Deadzone. These are largely Mark Copplestone figures. Obviously you can see the Games Workshop Ogryn over there, old school Ogryn, Space Ogre, which I've done a video on in the past. These are two Mantic Striders, again, which I've done videos on in the past, and they are part of this theme with their decals from an IS-2 World War II sprue. Someone has pointed out to me that these are Czech insignia, but what I don't get is why would there be Czech insignia on the decals for an IS-2? Would Stalin really have let a major battle tank from World War II be given to the Czechs, who were an occupied people? So maybe it's post-World War II, but even then, maybe it's when they were old and just being handed out willy-nilly to like the militia in these Soviet bloc satellite states. But either way, the colour goes fine, and in the dark, deep future, where the Neo-Soviets have their own worlds, who cares and who knows what insignia they will use. I'm sure in loads of these, in the lore of loads of futuristic games, you know, the Eastern Bloc are always just pulled together as one. So maybe these are all Czech Neo-Soviet troops. Let's turn to the command. So this is a war zone miniature from the Bauhaus faction, which I think was a merger of the Eastern Bloc and Germany in the Warzone Chronicles lore, and he fits in perfectly because even though he is a little bit bigger than the other guys, that's probably a function of him having a very expensive suit of armor. Love the little pickelhaube, futuristic pickelhaube. But he was sculpted by Mark Copplestone, and I think he's perfectly in scale. Unfortunately, in the upcoming game, he gets used as a lowly Marine Sergeant because none of the characters seem to have the kind of get-up that he has if they're other ranks, though there is a Major, who maybe I'll use another time, who's a bit more expensive and can, I think, call in barrages, which with his special strategic dice, which sounds fun. I could have painted the trousers blue, making him look like an NKVD FSB kind of trooper, secret police, keeping everyone in line, but it was just extra painting. And the theme I was trying to bring through here, not only in terms of the Neo-Sov theme, but just for me personally, was just to keep it basic so that I didn't spend ages and ages layering and layering and layering. These are largely just 3 highlights or some kind of interesting effect. So the helmets, for example, I thought, you know, they're not going to glint. They've been designed not to glint. They're not going to have 20 different layers of highlighting and washes. They're just a green, dark green colour, and then getting a bit of blister pack packaging material, and then dabbing on a bit of silver around the chipped edges, which you can see over there, there, and there. The star just getting 3 highlights. The guys in these overhauls, these fatigues, whatever they're called, combat fatigues, getting an amoeba pattern. And again, rather than, I could have painted it green because I think they had largely in World War II kind of green, light green with dark green amoeba pattern on it as camouflage, but I think they also had brown, and so that's what I've done. Again, just keeping it simple. And they're just the lowly recruits and gumps. And then these 2 guys have rocket launchers. I'm trying to work out if these are just the carrying packs, containers, or whether they're like Panzerfaust, one use, but who cares? In the game, they're just grenade launchers, heavy machine gun, sniper rifle. You know, everyone's seen Enemy at the Gates, Vasily Zaitsev and all that. Everyone needs in their Soviet force, a sniper, and in terms of scale, it all works very nicely, I think.
A few words about my faction, my side, the Neo-Soviet GCPS, coming in at 197 points against 200, but we'll come to a bit of a nuance on that in a moment, led by a Corporation Marine Sergeant, by no means not the best leader you can take. His special skill pretty useless, as it basically boils down to letting one of the Corporation recruits take a shot at someone who's charging them when they come into their block, but they're pretty useless and won't hit anyway and are likely to die, and no one's going to be charging them given my opponent's list, probably, so that doesn't really get used. The Ogre Terminator, big question here is he worth his points? We'll see. Pretty good at fighting, pretty good at saving himself, and goes down hard with 5 hit points. The 9 Corporation recruits who are Gumps, remembering that, an average human shoots and fights on a 5, saves on a 5, so these guys are really just there for numbers, and those numbers do count. 2 heavy support striders, who are walkers, again go down hard, 5 hit points. Armor 3, meaning that basically nothing, unless it has armor piercing, is going to get through them. And they have weight of fire as well, which means they can reroll missed shots, a number of missed shots. And then a sniper, who's basically just a standard Marine. Oh no, I've just realised that I have obviously inadvertently cheated, in the very clear sense, that in the game we played I also took 2 Marines with grenade launchers, because in my mind's eye, when I was preparing for the game and being distracted by all manner of things with little people running around, they were all going to be in the list, and then I saw they were over points and I removed them. But then when I turned up in the store for the game, desperately munching some crisps for dinner, and got roped into all manner of discussions, my mind had already clicked that they were in the faction in my side, and I never took them out, which gave me about 23 extra points and about 10% up on my opponent. I'm sure he will take it very, very well. I'm sure he'll forgive me, or at least maybe next time I can play 23 points down.
So in terms of the force that's going into combat in this game, it's not everyone, it's not those 2 officers, and it's not supposed to be, well, it's not him with the heavy machine gun, and it's not supposed to be these 2, but they do unfortunately fight. So that's what it should be, and that's what it is.
And coming to my opponent's list, they also play GCPS, but a very different kind of list, with a Ranger Lieutenant being their leader. Very different approach to my list. My list is really just about 3 big tough guys and a horde, and a bit of cheating. His list is around a lieutenant who's going to fly about and help range in the 2 mortars, a couple of Marine motorcycles who drive around at high speed, picking up tokens but are pretty crunchy and don't take much pain. A tac drone whose one job in life is to put holes in big things, with a weapon that is armor piercing 2. Remember that my striders are armor 3, so that will heavily take them down. And an engineer, which I understand you basically need to service the tac drone. He loves mortars, he just loves blowing things up from afar, and they're very annoying. Then he's got 6 Corporation Marines who are better than my standard Gumps, a Ranger who has a sniper rifle and comes in pretty well, and a Corporation veteran with a thermal rifle. Actually, that might be the fellow. Again, armor piercing 2. Again, a bit of a risk for my striders. Which equates to basically this, which is a picture from the last game we played, but there must be a few more souped up individuals in there to get up to the additional 50 points to 197, which he was also playing. So the scenario is breakthrough. You basically get the victory points of your troops who exit the field on the other side's end, +1. But the view I've always taken with these kind of scenarios is once your guys are off the field, they're not fighting, and the rest of your guys will get mown down, and you lose victory points for the guys who get mown down. So inevitably, this game just involved killing, and only one person, my opponent, on my opponent's side, actually made their way off the opponent's side. And you can see that I've set up in my 8 blocks in my deployment zone at the bottom. The striders you can see over there, the gumps interspersed, the ogrin, and on the other side, over here you've got one deployed mortar, the tac drone over here, a range of marines, and another mortar over there. The Neo-Sovs happily deployed at my end, as you can see. The tac drone over here starts crawling up the center of the field, and I recognize it's just got to go because it's going to put a hole in my striders, and the only real close combat agent I have, the ogrin, rushes up, ready to pounce with his white marker to help me remember who's gone and not. In a cinematic turn, one of my opponent's 2 monocycles comes flying up down his right flank and takes a few pot shots, skids in a drive-by shooting, and then jumps onto the other side, drives around to the other side of that barrier over a couple of turns, I think taking down 1 gump, but really aimed at picking up tokens on the way. My Ogrin leaps over the barrier, piles into the tac drone, who can't really defend himself very well, and loses 2 wounds, I think with only 1 to go, but can't struggle away the Ogrin with his eye on either taking out the monocycle, this is the second one, or that marine cowering behind that sushi bar sign. Meanwhile, on the right flank, a load of Neo-Sov gumps kind of start edging forward, supported by the strider, and with not very much on this flank on the other side. My opponent's leader has been up in one of the tall buildings in the center, having got there with her hover pack, and is calling in all manner of mortar assaults on various squares where my troops are, causing mayhem, using her combling skill, which gives them line of sight and a better ability to hit a square because it's a direct shot versus an indirect shot. And this annoys me because this is what happened last time, and I think the right thing to do is get one of my grenade launcher dudes to fire up into the position, because even if we don't injure her, which we don't, she will get knocked out of her bird's eye perch and will end up in one of the adjacent squares, hopefully in the one with the Ogrin in it, so he can rip her apart with his shank bayonet. Now, obviously, the first flaw in this is neither of the 2 grenade launchers are supposed to be within the points limit, but hey-ho, and they don't kill her, but they do knock her out of her perch, and in the next activation of mine, I send in one of the basic raw recruits. He's too inadequate, really, to cause any damage, and he doesn't, but then the next guy comes running up, also a raw recruit, and just rolls a remarkable number of 8s, which are exploding die, which allow him to keep rolling additional dice, and he takes her out. Deeply annoyed, my opponent calls in an unsighted mortar strike, which takes out the 2 heroes of the motherland and blows them up. the game really seems to be going my way as the Gumps flood into my right flank without too much opposition, perhaps foolishly getting into close combat with a couple of Marines. My opponent, a man of limited scruples, decides to call in one of his mortars onto that one of the crowded squares there, the one with two of mine, and doesn't kill his, if I remember rightly, but knocks two of mine flying, giving them each a wound. Back to the centre of combat, the medic, or the engineer, seems to have picked up some kind of blade and got the frenzy skill, because all of the tokens that actually were placed on the field seem to be on my opponent's half, because the ones on my half largely seem to end up in my deployment zone, which means that you remove them. So the engineer charges wildly into the Ogren, who's taken a couple of wounds, and he causes a bit more damage, I think one more wound, but fails to actually hit. And then the inevitable happens. My Ogren just bludgeons him to death with a couple of Gumps watching on and taking gentle pot shots as best they can. At that point, and actually before that point, everyone on my opponent's side lights up the Ogre, but he just doesn't take very much damage at all. Recognizing that the Ogre is going to die soon, I then run him up, and he attacks a third fellow and does fine, takes him out. So he's done really well for his points, but he's then obviously exposed towards my opponent's deployment zone and gets taken out and killed. But, he's done it for the motherland. Meanwhile, on my right flank, that Marine there looks around, sees this fellow attacking him. One of my guys who's been knocked flying by, two of my guys, they've been knocked flying by my enemy's mortar fire, and if I remember correctly, he basically takes out all of them, except for the one fellow over there who doesn't do very much for the rest of the game. What a hero for the corporation. But then on my right flank, enter the Strider, and he walks in and basically guns down everyone remaining on my opponent's side. But by this point, I haven't really marched my guys far enough up the field to meet the scenario requirement of getting people off my side, off my opponent's side of the battlefield. But it doesn't really matter because most of them are dead. So in a slightly cinematic turn, we've got two Striders stomping up the field. Up here, perched at the top of that building, we've got a Marine with a thermal rifle, -2 armor piercing, and he spent one turn being shot at, and because of suppression has been just lying down after one of his turns. But then my opponent had forgotten about him for another turn, and things had just kind of got a bit confused and dazed, and his ears are ringing. He kind of wakes up, stirs, hears the stomping of the Striders, and realizes that it falls to him because there's no more armor-piercing capability on that side of the battlefield, or frankly at all. And after the attack drone got taken out by the Ogren, and the Marine realizes it's just him, it comes down his comlink. It's you, you got to do it. You got to take out the Strider. And him being armor-piercing 2 with that weapon, and the Strider being armor 3, he can make a real difference. And he absolutely lays into that Strider down there at the bottom over 2 shots, because you can use these strategic dice which give you an extra shot, an extra dice, an extra attack, an extra move action. You can deploy those as and when. He uses one of those extra shots, takes 2 shots at the Strider, aiming at its vulnerable point, and he causes enormous damage. He causes 4 out of the 5 possible hit points it can take before just going boom. Because remember, in terms of what he's rolling, he's got a base of 3 die, needing probably something like a 5 to hit on a d8. And on top of that base those base 3 dice, he's got a clear shot at the Strider, +2 to taking it to 5. Because I'm not in any cover at all. He's higher up, taking him to 6, and he's got some kind of sniper scope skill, taking him to 8. He rolls 8 die, and get 7 hits. Because also if you roll an 8, it's an exploding dice, and you can re-roll that one as well, or roll another one as well. 7 out of 8. But by some miracle, even the remaining armor 1, after the armor 3 has been taken down 2 notches by the armor piercing 2, the armor 1 keeps the Strider alive after all my various successful saves. But might that Marine with his thermal rifle have been better advised to just keep his head down? Because, yes, he almost killed the Strider over there, but he didn't. So no victory points for him there. And that Strider fired wildly up, only caused 1 wound on him, fine. But then the second Strider walked backwards using one of the extra movement strategic dice and just launched a rain of fire and hell and brimstone at the point up there, and the thermal rifle dude died, giving me even more victory points. So we tally up the final score. It's something like 15-7 in my favour, though of course I've lost in default because of the dodgy addition of 23 or so points to my list unwittingly with those 2 dudes with the grenade launchers. But I've basically killed a lot of people on the other side. I've not scored any points for the scenario because none of my guys have left the deployment zone, have left the battlefield through the deployment zone of my opponent. My opponent has got at least 1 person off getting 2 victory points. They've taken out an Ogryn, I think, for 3, and taken out one of the grenade launcher dudes who's not supposed to be there for 2 points. I think the real, obviously, other than the mess up with the my army list being one reason why I won, I think it was because the number of people taken out on each side wasn't actually that different, but my opponent was getting no victory points at all for each raw recruit because they give you no victory points but can still shoot and fight, albeit badly. And so it's victory for the Neo-Sovs, Veliki Moguchi Sovietsky Soyuz, the great and powerful Neo-Soviet Space Imperium. And though there has been a degree of cheating by me when it's reported in Pravda, strangely that bit will be missed out.
While we've got them out, we might as well point out what else is left to paint in this collection. Maybe I'll paint them up for Zona Alpha, but you've got 4 Copplestone gangsters from Warzone from the mid-90s. They fit in just fine with these, I reckon. And they're kind of cyberpunk looking. And they'd need to be slightly spruced up and repainted, methinks. And you've got a whole load of partisan-looking guys, which I suppose you could use as special forces, dressed up to look like there's not quite a war going on, but there is. And then there's another ogre and another one floating around somewhere. And I'll paint those up maybe at some point.
And there you have it. That's a wrap. Thank you very much for watching to the end. Comment if you have any thoughts, like if you thought this was worthwhile as an exercise, and subscribe if you want to see anything shown at the end actually painted one day, or any more battles where I get the army list right before I start. Have a great day or evening.